What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you, and one that we have been greatly anticipating because every time this band surfaces, so do riffs and heaviness and all things wonderful about metal. We are going to go over the latest offering from High on Fire, Cometh the Storm. This comes out on the 19th of April on MNRK Heavy. This band formed in 1998 in Oakland, California. This is their 9th album overall, 6-year break in between their last album, Electric Messiah, which out of nowhere managed to get a Grammy, which, yeah, it's strange because I guess like Slipknot or Metallica or some other band that I really don't care about just didn't have a song out. They're like, well, you know what? We'll give it to a band that probably actually deserves it. I have been a fan of this band, probably since at least Blessed Black Wings. I believe I heard the song Devolution on a compilation. I was like, man, this sounds like Motorhead with like infinitely more grit on it. And yeah, I went out and just got everything available by them, and I've been steadily getting High on Fire albums since.
Yeah, I've been a fan of this band since at least their second record, Surrounded by Thieves. I saw High on Fire live with Soulfly a long time ago, and I was like, man, these guys are good, and I just never gave up.
Yeah.
And ever since then, somebody says High on Fire, I'm like, all right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Put it on. Put the CD on. Let's jam.
I'll be on tour. Let's go.
Yep, let's go.
And for those that don't know, man, if you're a stoner metal fan, you probably should know this band. But if not, this is just absolutely savage stoner metal that, you know, kind of balances out the warmth and fuzziness of stoner metal, but brings a lot of like hefty, doomy, dark nastiness. And they have a certified riff lord at the helm with Matt Pike. Yeah, this band is just absolutely crushed. I don't think they really have a bad album, but this one marked a little bit of a change. This is the first one with their new drummer, Cody Willis. Death Cat's now left in 2019, I believe, and he was a hell of a drummer. And yeah, Cody had some big shoes to fill. I was kind of, wondering about that one. And honestly, I think Cody fit in really well. But I will also say this album is a little bit different, at least in comparison to maybe the last two, I would say. If you're looking at the cover, you notice the older logo on there that you saw on such classic releases, again, as Blessed Black Wings, Death of the Zeus Communion. I absolutely love that album. And musically, this is kind of a throwback to it. In fact, this is possibly the grooviest album I've heard them do since Surrounded by Thieves.
Yeah, this album is jam-packed full of groove. Yeah, I would say 10 out of the 11 songs are definitely more groove-laden than the rest. There's not a lot of the straightforward D beat that you come to get out of High on Fire. Yeah,
somehow, High on Fire had the awesome idea of blending thrash and almost kind of hardcore D beats and faster, more up-tempo songs with stoner metal. And, generally stoner metal is more mid-tempo to slow. And that's been a big thing of theirs for years, honestly. Yeah. The first two albums I feel are notably a little bit more slow, but everything since, there's always been a lot of faster songs to break up the slower songs. And honestly, you don't get a faster song until the 7th track in here. A lot of this is more mid-tempo to slow. And man, does this album just bring the doom and the riffs. Right out of the rip, the opening track, Lamb's Bread, you're just greeted right to the face with just a beast of a riff.
Yeah, big, thick, sizzling guitars. Now, part of this is in partisan to the production on the album, which of course is Mr. Kurt Ballou, and I mean, you don't go wrong with Kurt Ballou as far as the sound of an album. He generally is pretty spot on with making sure you get the biggest, thickest, sizzling guitars, and the drum work on here. I mean, you're hitting a snare drum that's this big with a baseball bat, and then you're hitting the toms with sledgehammers, and then it's just you with the biggest things possible to hit things with. Just,
yeah.
And that's it.
I mean, that's Kurt Ballou 101. Give it heft, give it thickness and chunkiness. And, I mean, this is not his first rodeo with the band. He's been working with High on Fire since De Verminis Mysteris, I believe. But even, that album in comparison is a lot different. Again, I haven't kind of heard this side of High on Fire, as a predominant thing on an album in a long time. And hearing these kind of slow, groovy, kind of chuggy monsters of songs. Like they're more lumbering in pace, and I mean, as riff driven as ever, but I don't know, I feel like the fact that a lot of the riffs really drive the song and repeat often, like they get stuck in your head. The first single I heard was Burning Down, which, man, that song is just absolutely nasty. It's one riff. It is essentially one riff with some key changes, but you get this cool tribal drum pattern.
Yep.
It lumbers, and man, if you've seen the creepy video that they did for it.
No.
People gnawing on rats and puking.
Yeah, don't eat rats. The video for this is it's something else.
Oh, it's grosser than hell.
And again, part of this might be, in fact, of having the new drummer, whereas Dez was a little bit more, I don't want to say straightforward, but like played a little bit more in the pocket and a little bit more, you know, again, D beats and things that are native to thrash. Whereas Cody comes along and his style is more like, to me at least, reminded me of Reed Mullins from COC, playing a lot of more mid-tempo beats and a lot more groove, and a lot of that is because there's a lot of tribal drumming.
Tons of it.
Like, we're talking like 7-8 songs here just full of big tribal drum fills. And I think that's how you make single riffs heavier, is by accenting them with toms and just making the beats bigger overall.
Yeah, the first half of the album is littered with like cool tribal, like accented rhythms and just flat out like tribal breaks. The opening track, Lamb's Bread, there is like a Middle Eastern tribal break in it.
Yeah.
And I believe some of the extra percussion was done by Roy Mayorga, you know, formerly of Stone Sour, and I think he's in Ministry now. But it takes this really cool atmospheric break, and like the melodies are really cool. Like you get that big Middle Eastern vibe. It almost sounds like there's an oud or like a sitar or something in the background. The title track actually kind of leads in with those cool tribal melodies and like rhythms and such. Because a lot of these songs, like they just kind of take off. Like you are greeted to a riff immediately like a sledgehammer to the face. But this song takes its time to build up. Honestly, I think it's one of the most dynamic songs in terms of like a big switch between the verse and the chorus, because you get this cool tribal build. You hear Matt Pike sort of like gruffly crooning, and there's like a really good melody to it, and then all of a sudden the chorus comes in and just hits with this just eruption of doom. It's like every shot of Mount Doom erupting in Lord of the Rings. That kind of riff.
And definitely more stoner too. I think the stoner music really comes into play during the title track too, because the way it comes in, it's kind of more spacey and a little bit more like whimsical almost. The vocals are far off in the distance, like, and it's got a really, really cool build before it comes in and smashes you in the nards.
Right in the nards. But as this album goes on, you get like a lot of like different swings in terms of like different vibes. There's a 3-track run towards the end called The Beating, Tough Guy, and Lightning Beard, which I pretty much call like the barfight trilogy.
Yeah.
These are probably the most aggressive songs on here. Like they kind of lay off the doom, they pick up the pace a little bit. Like The Beating, we might as well call the D beating.
The D beating.
Because it's the only song on here that has like a prominent fast D beat, and generally you expect like 2 or 3 of those on a High on Fire album. This is the lone one, and it's got this kind of like fun, like punky / like old school heavy metal sort of cool melody to it. But it's just an absolute barn burner. And then Tough Guy, man, that riff comes in and flexes its riffy muscles and then puts you in a headlock.
That song is the first time it gets really nasty, really just stanky, kind of. I wouldn't call it full-blown like death metal stank face, because it's not that, but I mean, it's definitely like, ooh, all right, I'm about to punch somebody.
You're about to get punched.
Yep.
And Lightning Beard is like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting because like rhythmically, again, this album doesn't seem to like to go like super fast, but there's a lot of cool like intricate fills and turnovers that are incorporated in the beats. It has a really thrashy riff. Like it opens up with like kind of a machine gun chug, and you're like, all right, prepping for the D beat, and instead it kind of just does this cool like off-time turnover pattern. And that was something I really liked about this album. Like the drum patterns are a lot different. You can 100% tell that this is a different drummer behind the kit. But what he does to like accent the riffs in terms of his drum work, or like throw these little hitches in the grooves, I really like that. Like it kind of gives this album a slightly different feel, albeit like still kind of a familiar feel, because if you're a High on Fire fan, you're gonna instantly recognize this as High on Fire. If someone put this on, you're gonna hear Matt's gruff vocals and a stupid heavy riff, and you're like, yeah, no, I know this place.
Right.
This is a warm, fun place. I also will say that I think this album has just a darker tone overall. Like, everything feels like a war march, especially with how huge the drums are. Like, anytime there's a tom hit, like, it's like an army of orcs, except they're all wearing like denim vests with giant spikes, and they're just about to descend on a town. I'm pretty sure that's how most of the city of Baltimore feels about MDF. Like, yep, they're here again. God.
Oh, man. I cannot wait.
Everything smells like beer, BO, and cigarettes. And weed.
It's part of our charm.
It is.
Now, still within all this dark and gruffness, it is not without melody. Songs like Hunting Shadows, I mean, this is most notably the more melodic overall. For me, it kind of had like a cross between like Baroness and the Sword, and just a lot of like lighter feel to it. It's still not without heft, but it's just like a lighter feeling overall. The bass really comes out and shines in this, as does it in Lightning Beard as well. Like, there's just spots where you can hear him doing like, I don't want to say noodles, but like just little runs that complement the melodies really nice. It's got a real slick bridge to it. And then the instrumental track, Karen Lick Yol, I mean, that's straight Middle Eastern vibes all the way. That's Aladdin and Apu searching for loaves of bread.
Actually, weirdly enough, the first thing I thought of before Aladdin was, you remember that cool scene in Conan where he knocks out the camel?
Oh, yeah.
It's that scene on a loop. In fact, you can probably take the beat of it and sync it up to when his fist makes contact with that camel. Shouldn't have spit on him. Camel fucked up. Clearly.
Actually, we're gonna do that later. I think we had the technology to do that. I'm gonna see what happens.
That sounds like a gloriously stupid waste of time. I am down.
Yeah, totally. I was thinking about wasting time in other ways tonight, but not now.
I really like this track. It's the lone instrumental on this album, and like, all right, in terms of like interludes and like segue tracks in the next one, because it does lead in really well to Soul's Golden Curse, which is another banger on here. But I like the fact that it doesn't feel like it's just like there as a setup, like it's its own song. The acoustic playing on it is absolutely fantastic, and that tribal drum pattern I think is great, and it's got a cool build to it. Like, it doesn't feel like half a song. There's a section like about like a quarter way through where the bass line kind of sneaks in under the melody. And there's like a good like ascending melody towards the end, like it has a crescendo to it.
And it's extremely catchy. Even after the song was done, I still had the riff playing in my head.
But most of this is just about raw heft. And I mean, dude, the riffs on here, like pretty much every song, you were greeted to a riff that could just absolutely cave in someone's skull. Trismegistus is just absolutely loaded with these cool tribal rhythms and this monstrously chuggy riff. I don't even know what that word means. I don't even know if I said it right. But I know that it is absolutely heavy. But in terms of heaviness, and yeah, like this album closes with a certified banger. The most dark, sinister, brooding song on the entire album, Darker Fleece. The song was so heavy that it literally knocked the boogers out of John's nose.
Yeah, I sneezed 3 times in my shirt during this song. That's how heavy it was.
Yeah.
Just the 1 wasn't enough, and 2 obviously wasn't enough, and heavy. Oh my god. So heavy. And one of the coolest syncopated riffs and drum beats, I think, are in this song. Towards the beginning, it's got this huge fuzzy buildup. Like, you know that something is coming. You know that they have waited to put all their apples in a basket, so to speak, as far as a heavy song is concerned.
I mean, it's 10 minutes long.
Right. And after this fuzzy buildup comes this, probably one of the more intricate riffs, I would say, on this record. There's just a lot more to it, but the drum beat that works behind this riff is super sweet. Everything is just on a dime, syncopated, and it's gross.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite moments in the album.
And, I mean, the entire song is just heavy, bleak, ominous, and it only gets heavier towards the end. The last breakdown on this album closes out like, I don't know, like an avalanche. Like, this is like a giant kicking down the gates of a castle and, yeah, pretty much just ransacking the village very slowly.
Yeah, this is like somebody throwing bags of cement at you, and you're like, you can stop now, and they're like, no, 40 more. God.
We stop when you're dead.
God.
And how this band just knows how to build up stuff. Like, the tension building on this album is absolutely fantastic. Cometh the Storm, the title track, it does a great job building into that heavy chorus. And I like the fact that you can sense a lot of these things coming, like it's something stirring in the air. But when they get to it, like the payoff is always awesome. And like pretty much to perfection, Darker Fleece, like when it leads into that last breakdown, you know it's coming. You know it's coming from the beginning of the song. Like that is something dark and menacing. You can hear screams in the background. That's the people that heard the riff first. They heard it like, oh my God, that's apocalyptic. We're dead.
Yeah, the build-up for this song is almost so intense you can tell it's coming from the beginning of the album.
Yeah.
It's just like every song they're just holding on to a piece of Darker Fleece. Like, get ready, get ready. You thought that was cool? Get ready, get ready. Here it is. Ha ha.
As far as any negative moments on here, I'd really have to nitpick. There were some moments on Trismegistus, or however you say that word, whatever. It was like, all right, I feel like it kind of droned on this riff a bit, and that's like kind of a big vibe on this album. Like, if you like the riff they're playing, guess what? You're going to hear it for almost the entire song.
Yep.
Like, again, Burning Down. It's almost one riff with just a couple of key changes, but that riff is awesome. And honestly, most of these riffs are awesome, but some of them, you know, they can drag a little bit, but that's kind of part of stoner metal. Like, and I kind of like this more jam session sort of vibe on here. I will say, while I like the melodic shift on Hunting Shadows, like there's some really catchy kind of like classic heavy metal licks, like, you know, Manila Road, or like something like Spirit Adrift or something like that. It's catchy, and it's got some really awesome playing on it, like some really intricate and very different playing. Like, this kind of is like a big standout in the album just in terms of the vibe. It's a lot more bright and triumphant sounding. Well, I mean, the rest of it sounds triumphant in a way. It sounds like evil triumphing over like everything good ever. But this is like probably the one moment where I feel like Matt Pike's vocals are a little exposed. Like, his vocals are awesome on like the stuff that just kind of requires the grit and the ugliness. Like, even when he croons, it's just gravelly and just like he's been gargling like broken glass, battery acid, and rusty nails. And it's awesome. But there they kind of feel a little bit exposed, and he's doing like, you know, some extra long crooning sections where it's like, I don't know if that necessarily works, but that's about it. Like, everything else kind of checks off everything I wanted out of a High on Fire album, down to the Kurt Ballou production and the absolutely badass Eric Roper artwork. I love this. Kind of knew I would, but this is like a little bit different and kind of a cool throwback to their earlier stuff. I am going to go ahead and give it 4.5 stars. I dig the hell out of this. Like, it's just a super strong album, and it doesn't feel like they're kind of just following the formula of the last two. They're really kind of getting back to like the old, gritty, extra dirty sound. I like the fact that this is notably more groove laden. Cody Willis's drum work on here I think is fantastic, and it's different. Like, it kind of has like a different vibe to it. And dude, Matt Pike riffs all day long. There's not a riff on here that I was like, man, that's just, you know, okay. Like, all these riffs are just absolutely savage as hell. This is an absolute killer album. Like, if you're a big fan of High on Fire, you're going to love this. And if you love things like Crowbar, The Sword, like the early Sword, orcs beating you over the head with a mace, yeah, if you're into that, you'll probably like this album. Conan punching a camel repeatedly, yeah. It's kind of like that. It hits like that. Yeah, check this out. High on Fire rules. Jammin' John, tell them what you think.
I'm going to go ahead and give this 4 stars. This was definitely a killer record. Like, you know, we've been saying if you like High on Fire, you're still going to really like High on Fire. Cody Willis does a damn good job on drums. I like all the tribal grooves. It's a very unique presentation to the same droning riff over and over again. Like, it just makes it pop a little bit more. At the same time, that is a minor gripe for me. Tribal drums fill out a majority of this record. Like, there's at least 7 or 8 songs that start with tribal drums. And that sometimes makes it a little bit hard to differentiate between songs. It's a gripe and it's not. Like, it's still all really cool. But if you're going to start a song with tribal drums, maybe start the next song with not tribal drums and something a little bit more straightforward. Because, once again, if you like a riff, you're going to hear that riff over and over and over again. So there are different ways to present it. But still, it's not really a gripe. Like I said, it's kind of a half-assed gripe. The songs are all extremely catchy, and in fact, most of the builds to the choruses are pretty fucking awesome. The bridge work is really neat. All of this sounds really fun to play, too. Like, I was paying attention to a lot of the grooves, and I was like, man, that would be cool. Man, wouldn't it just be fun to just beat the piss out of the floor tom? Oh, look, he's doing it. Sweet. This does harken back to a time in High on Fire that I haven't heard in quite some time. In fact, this kind of groovy presentation is what got me into this band in the first place. So, yeah, if you liked High on Fire before, you're definitely still going to like them. I would compare this to the Melvins for sure. Definitely some older COC. If you like orcs dressed in denim, you're probably really going to dig this record, so check it out.
Again, Baltimore, we know what you think of us, but it's okay because you're like kind of right.
Yeah.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have shirts, both old and new. The older ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And certainly, last but not least, thank you guys for tuning in and subscribing and doing all the wonderful things that you do that keep us moving. Thralls of Metal is a whole lot bigger than we ever thought it would be, and it keeps growing, which blows my mind most days. It's stuff that we love to do, and we love to do it for you guys. Thank you.
You guys absolutely rule. Tons of content coming your way. I know the usual speech here, but yeah, we got some fun stuff planned for you and some cool collaborations in the future, so definitely stay tuned. So one more big thank you because you guys are absolutely awesome, and we will catch you later.